My last season review was way too similar to my season preview I did, and it really just felt like I was releasing the same video. Or in some cases, it just took out all motivation to do more in-depth reviews on some other series. So, instead, I want to take a look at the season as a whole, give some highlights, low points, and probably make a few jokes that won't age too well. Let me know in the comments if this format is better or worse than a typical show-by-show breakdown. So with that said, let's get started. Winter 2019 was a weird season for anime. Looking at all the shows out there, there were a ton of great offerings between Mahou Shoujo Tokushusen Asuka, Egao no Daika, Dororo, and Mob Psycho just to name a few. But despite that killer roster, the season as a whole felt pretty bland. And looking back, I'm trying to figure out how it left me with such a lukewarm reception when as many shows in it I would easily classify as good. And since that's a hell of a contradictory bombshell to drop on you all, I'll start there. I think part of it was the islands of good content being isolated with pretty bad shows filling out the rest of the week. The better shows were dumped right on 2 days, which made the week as a whole pretty dull and ultimately makes the good shows shine less bright when you watch, say, 5 of them back to back on a single day. Christ, Japan. I know these all air at different times on different television stations, produced by different studios with different contracts, but make it a bit easier on the poor nerds dissecting your niche entertainment online half a world away by pacing yourself. But that's only part of the issue, I think. The other half is there was such a stark contrast in good and bad that there was no middle of the road to make either side stand out. The goods were all really good, and the bads were all really bad. So I didn't have a proper baseline this season to compare it to, which is weird, I know. So let's talk about those goods. No, those goods come later. Asuka's dark and depressing take on an otherwise bright and usually light-hearted genre was a breath of fresh air. I was a big fan of the storyline with this one. Its twisted imagery, fused with its mature themes of loss and trauma, resonated with me on a deeper level. Egao no Daika came off as dull fluff at first, but quickly took a turn towards Game of Thrones territory with its complete lack of shits for protagonist plot armor. Another solid story that keeps me guessing where it's going. Dororo stroked my samurai murder boner with its intriguing story for a genre I've been sorely missing. This series was a well-rounded package containing a compelling narrative, excellent animation, and dripping with style. The fight choreography here was astoundingly creative, and I absolutely loved it. And Mob took a measured pace in building its story, but kept the same fantastic visuals and hype that has me coming back each week. If I loved the fight choreography in Dororo, I'm dropping to my knee for Mob. The action was fluid and dynamic, especially towards the end, and packed a ton of personality with its animation style. So a ton of great things standing out for different reasons, which is why I consider these shining beacons this season. These were the shows I looked forward to each week, and the ones I highly recommend people check out. Less good was Boogiepop. I was actually ready to fall in love with this series when it was announced, but it never quite gelled for me. The pacing was all over the place. While there's parts I really liked, there were also parts I was bored to tears. Overall, a piece of throwback novelty that was pretty okay in retrospect. Dome Kano's inconsistent tone threw me for a loop at times. When it was comedic, it was great. When it took itself seriously, it was just okay. I like the characters here, but the plot itself is laughable, to say the least. For a comedy swimming in horrible connotations, Wata 10 wasn't actually nearly as bad as it could have been. I expected a ton of wink wink nudge nudge, she's a pedophile jokes, and isn't that so crazy spelled with a capital K. But the animation and humor were cute, with some actual variety to them. The second half of Tensei Shitara's line Datta fell a bit flat for me too. I honestly think this series peaked in the middle, with it rushing through its second half to get as far as it could while also paying lip service to stuff they're expecting to develop in the second season. It was a bit of a disappointment overall. As for the bad, well, I flat out dropped Wise and Kemurikusa. Neither could hold my attention past their first episode. The animation and story were both abysmal, leaving me with not much to even care about to keep me watching. And these are what I mean when I say the season's bad, or really fucking bad. Girly Airforce pulled a reverse Egao no Daika, starting off at least somewhat intriguing and then squandering all the goodwill it built by venturing into the mundanity of slice of life. Probably a case of trying to have your cake and eat it too with its interesting premise, but still wanting a harem to pull in the horny otaku market. It just leaves me with an unfocused and meandering mess. Ueno-san wa Bukiyou was pretty boring as a time waster, expelling its entire comedic repertoire in the first segment. Really, it just made the series monotonous. But at least it was easily digestible with its short runtime that I did watch it through to the end. The medium as a whole had a roller coaster of a time as well this season. Shows I enjoyed ranged from complete crap to painfully average to the point it was invisible to absolutely stunning, though I've already filleted this series enough for that. But at least it can't be said that I'm an animation snob, since I had shows with what I thought was good animation as middle of the road. Both Domekano and Boogiepop had some nice artistic direction that stands out, but I also had shows with crap animation in my upper tier this spin. CG aside, Egao no Daika was pretty minimal with its movements and too polished to even have a distinctive style. Asuka is, I want to blame the animation, but the art direction is ripped straight from the manga. Now, parts of the manga are objectively better in terms of style, at least looking like a more natural approximation of human faces, so there's definitely a budget issue with this series. But it's times like this I wish they had taken some artistic liberties. But that's just me being a pedantic twat. Another weird thing about this season was the sheer amount of dark shows out. It seemed like every series was either a military show, Asuka, Egao no Daika, Girly Airforce, or dark and depressing like Dororo, Boogiepop, two of the previously mentioned. So I don't know if Japan was off its meds or what, but most of the shows out had a decent amount of gore and bloodshed, or just dealt with some fucked up subjects. We had PTSD, the moral quandaries of sleeping with your family and or teacher, dead students, curses, war, pedophilia, and unironic isekai. And yes, that last one is on par. And I'm not against that by any means. It just felt piled on this season. Levity was a rare commodity, and perhaps that's another factor why this season felt so bland. Everything had a pretty samey tone trying to depress me. And again, I don't want to insinuate that this was planned by any stretch. But certainly we could have used a bit more lighthearted stuff to avoid the flood of military and dark that we got. God, I never thought I'd be asking for more shitty slice of life. What has the world come to? I guess let me sum up my thoughts and slap some numbers on these shows to wrap this up, at least before we move on to the next season. Despite having some excellent offerings, Winter 2019 just didn't stand out to me on account of its all too consistent tone, massive swings in quality, and unfortunate release times. On the whole, it just came off as meh, even with series I would easily consider great. Asuka was a solid 8 out of 10 for having a great story, even if the animation is subpar. Domekano is a solid 7 out of 10 with its laughable drama but great characters. Boogiepop's a 6 out of 10 for all over the place pacing. Egao no Daika is a decent 7 out of 10 for being more than meets the eye in terms of plot. Mob Psycho Season 2 is easily a 10 out of 10 for keeping everything I loved about the first season and just building off of it. Wata 10 is a 7 out of 10 for having some decent humor and varied characters. Tensei Shitara Slime Datta Ken, second half, is a 6 out of 10 for glossing over important story points with its rushed pacing. Dororo is a solid 9 out of 10 for its literally everything. Girly Airforce I have no problem giving a 4 out of 10 for being painfully bland and boring after its first episode. And if I was pressed to rank Wise and Kemurikusa despite not getting past their first episodes, I'd probably slap a 2 and a 1 on them respectively for literally go see my thoughts in my season preview. And lastly, Ueno is a 5 who gives a fuck what I think points out of 10 for being a completely average raunchy comedy show. So with that, I can finally put the nails in winter 2019's coffin and bury it out back next to the other seasons. Because at this point, I'm ready to move on to something new. Speaking of, what does spring have in store for me? Oh. My body is ready. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and do all the other YouTube stuff because that really helps me out. Thanks for watching.